Welcome to this webinar on Curate content and create experience. My name is Leanne Pantjes. I'm a digital learning consultant of Capgemini Academy, and in this webinar I will give you insights on the project done by an amazing team of the University of Maastricht. The students, as you can see on the picture, are from the Master Learning and Development in Organization, and this project was part of their final course, Learning in the Workplace. They have various backgrounds such as hospitality, marketing, business management, and also in nationality. So we had an Irish student, Niall, we had a German student, Philip, Yvonne as a Dutch student, a Belgian student such as Evie, and Kelly and Anna we also had in the team. So to show you some of the setup of this webinar, we will first discuss the background of the challenge given to the students. Then I will show you the challenge given. Afterwards we go to the approach that they took to come up with a solution based on the challenge, the outcomes of the project research they've done, at the end the feasible solution that they come up with. And it's quite exciting also to show you because I was very impressed with it. So some background. Of course we know that there are very many learning providers and learning sources around us that we can turn to develop ourselves in our development need. I can go to online platforms, I can go to open source learning providers, I can go to an academy, I can also go to other training courses providers, the ones that are offered by my organization, or what I can do also in my spare time. And organizations and clients of ours, as I see in daily business, is that it's quite a struggle to find a path through all those learning sources and to create an actual learning experience from it. So therefore I was wondering, and I also gave the challenge to the students, that how can we effectively get insight in all those learning sources and also create a learning experience around it, so it is a learning experience for the individual, but also meet the business goals that the organization has set. So I gave this challenge. So how can Capgemini Academy or you gain an understanding of clients' learning needs in an effective and efficient way to create that ultimate learning experience? And the client, of course, can be the business, can be a team, but can also be an individual. It was quite a challenge for the students to get to work with such a broad question. So how could they come up with a feasible solution with this broad question? They came up with a more agile approach on how to approach this project. So they had 8 weeks of time, which is quite short to get from a scope that brought to a feasible end solution. But they really used their talents in their team. So they used the talent of researching, they used the talent of interviewing, and used the talent of also visual design and marketing. So that I was really impressed with that. And of course they also get support from both the University of Maastricht as well as Capgemini Academy as a client for them. So the academic coach supported them in their research purposes, and I supported them in their feasibility and also in getting the client's needs reflected in the end solution. And during these 8 weeks we had a communication heartbeat, and that means that we had regular contact on a set time, so the students had the opportunity to come up with their questions, and also I could give them information on a set time. So that It was iterative. We had many contact moments around the set time, but there was always a set time which we had room for, um, reserved for the questions and information sharing. So also project management was one of the goals the students had, and that was really what they also showed me, that they were really professional in their way of approaching clients as me. And to come up with an end solution, they had to do data collection, and that's what I did with interviews, a survey, and literature. They conducted in 1 week 22 interviews, and they did a survey among 49 participants, and they also did literature research. And that was really requested also from me, that they came up with an end solution that was not something that they thought was nice, or what 100 people would say that was nice, but was also validated from their academic study. So if we look into the research as a basis for this project, it came out that you first have to look at the learning needs from both a managerial perspective as an employee perspective. So a managerial perspective really reflects also the business goals or team goals, and employee perspective really reflects the personal development and also talent development in their own role or to a future role. But only the managerial and employee perspective will not be effective enough to really get into the core of learning needs and creating that ultimate learning experience. So of course there is interaction between the manager and employee preferences and also perspective, but they are surrounded by the context of the organization. So is the learning climate, as we call it, supportive enough for people to grow in their role and in their competences? I will come back to it later on. So some facts and figures. From the interview, you can see that we had more male interviewees than female interviewees, but there was a nice division between the total work experience. So we had younger people who just started to work, and we had some more experienced people who had 10 plus years of work experience. And what was also important, that they had a mix of both employee and managerial perspective. As what you can see is that they conducted interviews at employee level, but also management and upper management were involved in these interviews. From the survey you can see that also the total work experience, there's a quite nice division. The same applies as with the interviews on gender, so we had more male than female. What can be because we conducted the interviews and survey at an IT organization. Age was also quite a nice division, and also that is of course a little bit reflected in the total of work experience. So the students really deep dived into the research, and also made the interview script and the survey based on those research factors. So what are factors that support learning and really promote effective learning? You have to look into the learning resources. What kind of resources are there in the organization? What do people have access to in the organization, but also outside? What do they actually use? As a second factor, there is the learning preferences and behavior. So how do they think they feel is learning preferred? So what kind of learning do they prefer? Do they prefer to do it digitally, or do they prefer more face-to-face learning? Do they prefer to go to a formal classroom or a formal set of time where you learn, or do they do it informally in train? The skills are also important, because the type of skills that you develop also determines if the learning source that you get into, or that you try to use, is effective. So is it effective if I want to improve my communication skills to only look at the video of 5 minutes? Do I actually effectively improve my communication skills? So therefore they also took the factor skills within. And then lastly, the learning climate. So what supportive factors are around the employee, are around in the organization, that really supports that effective learning behavior. So to challenge you also a little bit, I would like to ask you to fill in a poll about who prefers to learn digitally the most. For me, as a digital learning consultant, I was quite surprised with the results. So I'm also curious of what you think. Who learns digitally the most? Are these the young professionals? Are these the more advanced professionals, so they have more work experience? Or are these the real senior professionals, the real experienced ones who have more than 10 years of work experience? At the end of this webinar, I will come up with the results. So hopefully you will pick it up from there. Then we have the results of the learning resources, which was the first factor to take into account. And from the interviews, it shows that there are many resources at this organization that are used to learn and to develop themselves in their skills. So you can see that there's face-to-face learning resources. Think of communities, peer-to-peer training. There's also a blended kind of resources, such as really academy trainings, really young professional programs. So if you are not that experienced yet in work, you probably get a boost program. And at the other side of the line, you have the digital learning resources. And it's quite interesting to see that digital resources are not only, as I call it, formal online learning providers, but really also people, they really see like SharePoint, a wiki, and an internet page also as learning resources. So that's interesting for us as learning professionals, to really also take that into account when creating learning experiences. The second factor that I want to discuss is skills. So as you can see, in this IT organization, there was a high demand for IT or soft skills. So the technical skills, they thought, well, of course I need to develop those, but there's a very high demand of soft skills. And it also reflects the transformation that many organizations are in, coming from a more blueprint organization towards a more agile organization, which is now quite the basis in IT, but also is spreading among the organization to, for example, HR or compliance. And what was also a little bit difficult about this question was that the hard skills varies per role. So it really depends on your role, what kind of hard skills you would like to develop. Another result is that, as you can see, most people still like to learn face-to-face. And sometimes it also really depends on the context. So sometimes I just need some more face-to-face learning, peer-to-peer, based on their learning needs at the moment. And what you can see in the circle diagram of formal versus informal learning is that really the combination of formal, so formal is like the real set time of learning, you get time for it, you go to a classroom, for example, and informal learning that goes in the flow of work, or you talk to somebody and you learn new stuff. That's more about informal learning. That is really preferred within the group of participants of the interviews. Then if you talk about learning climate, there's one distinct factor that you have to take into account, and that is leadership. So are people supported to go to learning or to really experience learning programs? Are they encouraged to do discussions with others? And as you can see that there's a lot of support for learning experienced in this IT organization, but that encouragement for discussion, so that a coach or manager tells you, please go to someone else in the organization and really get to the bottom of this, discuss it with your colleague, that encouragement is still a little bit lacking, as you can say. But it was quite positive, a quite positive result that there was quite some support for learning. If this was a negative result, we could say that there should be more effort on the coaching role of leaders, of managers in this case. So if we look at learning climate, there are many other factors that support our learning need and also that makes us effective develop ourselves. So for example, space for learning. Do you have time for learning? Do you also have a platform where you can go to learn? And in this research, this particular IT organization, it showed that there are many resources and possibilities, but there's sometimes time lacking because of the daily business. If you talk about the factor exchange of knowledge, so is there enough room to discuss your mistakes, discuss failures, and also discuss it to become better? You see that there, of course, there is quite some room for openly discussing failures, but the more experienced persons who were interviewed really felt that they were less positive about it, because they said, well, I'm quite experienced and therefore people expect from me that I know the answer, and there was less room for openly discuss your failures. The other factor is support for learning. So is learning appreciated if you're going to develop yourself, if you learn new skills? Are people saying hooray, or others, do they think it's just okay? And there's also some difficulty in this, because reward is always of some type of they assume that it is more like the financial reward, but it can also of course be more an intrinsic reward, that you feel better, for example. If you talk about learning and effective learning, and what I also see myself is that you really would like to have your individual responsibility and autonomy to choose what you like to learn and also to develop yourself. And within this IT organization, it showed that this was very high, but there should be some kind of balance with guidance. So we need to support people in their learning path. If you talk about self-directed learning, of course, you hear it quite a lot, also self-directed teams, but without support of others or support of a coach, it's sometimes difficult to really get to your goal and also to know if it's the right choice to make for your organization also in your role. And the last factor in learning climate is really, do you have enough room to take experiments and risks? And sometimes it's also talking about sharing information inside and outside the organization. So inside we have enough space for sharing our information, but sometimes outside the organization we feel that it's more difficult to do. The student team came up with the following recommendations. So allocate school hours for learning. And as a digital learning consultant and also the digitization of the world as we see it around us, that sounds a little bit vintage, I would say, to allocate real school hours. But because of the speed of and agility of business, it really is effective if we allocate hours in which we have focus and we really can develop ourselves towards that goal. But also provide sufficient guidance, so there's someone next to you who can guide you to towards that goal. Individualization, of course, that we have the feeling that it's really created for us, but also created with purpose, so we know what goal to achieve, and it's really my goal, and I can also add things to my learning path. And in addition to that, it's also important to have one access to all those learning resources we started with. So in the jungle, we need to have one access, we need to have a common thread to attach to get towards our learning goals and development goals. So if we look into the solution that the students came up with, I also of course had some requirements, as every client has. I would like to have a feasible solution that was cost effective and easy to develop. I want something that measures learning needs and can be rapidly done, so we have a lot of input at a high speed, so we can get into designing. So they come up with the learner meter, and they come up with the name, they come up with the design, and I was really surprised and impressed by it. So if you look at marketing, for example, and what we as learning and development professionals can learn from that, it's really amazing. So I would encourage, based also on this project, is to encourage to go to your marketing colleagues, to your UX colleagues, really to create those amazing learning experiences. So they created an app concept in which we can do both an employee and managerial perspective learning needs assessment that takes 15 minutes. So that's not that long, and it really pinpoints the questions on the factors for effective learning. So these are some interfaces that shows those. Of course, we need data to really know what kind of learning experience we can create based on those learning needs. So we have some personal data, of course, but also based on the factors given, such as what kind of learning resources do you use, given by the business. So the business can put in, for example, we use this online platform, we have these training providers, and also we have digital and classroom training, for example. So what kind of learning resources, what kind of learning preferences, do you like to learn digitally most or more classroom? And it's also dependent of the skills that you put in. So you really give much data about your learning preferences, about your skills, and about the way you learn. And also they thought, the project team thought of that you really need a reward for it if you fill in the survey. So therefore they come up with the latest interface, and that is a badge. So I was talking about that you can learn from other practices and also from marketing, for example, or user experience, or what I also said, data. Think about what you can do with data and AI and learning analytics. So they've created from the respondents' outcomes, the project team created a learner persona. And a learner persona is it's usual to use for marketing purposes, so you really target your audience with the right resources. And therefore you can also create a high customer experience, aka you can target a high learning experience for your products and services. And besides that, we can compare groups, so we know how people learn, when people learn, is it effective, and compare to the other group of personas, for example, the more experienced one. And this one shows the young professional, and I raised the poll about who would probably learn digitally the most, and I have the results. So it's quite interesting to see that your results show a nice division of the three answer options. So the young professionals, you say there, 32% of you say young professionals learn digitally the most. 38, so slightly a bit more, say, well, if you are more experienced at work, you probably learn digitally the most. And 30%, so a little less, shows that senior professionals, so the most experienced people, learn digitally the most. So it's quite nice to say that this project showed, this project research showed that young professionals learn digitally less because they really like to learn from their peers in communities. Think of dojos, as we call it in IT, but also learn from experts, so more experienced people, such as the school hours or genius hours, as we call it. And if we have more experience, we have less experienced people to turn to most of the time. So therefore, we learn more in an individual way, and therefore we'd like to learn more digitally. So thank you for your response to the poll. As a closure, I talked about the outcomes of the project of the University of Maastricht. And they got a really good grade for the projects and also for the project report. So I was really pleased also with their end presentation. And also the university was really pleased. They took into account many factors for learning, so that really gave us a validated end solution. And the end solution was first a learning needs assessment app, the Learnometer, and of course also the things we can learn from marketing, the learner personas. So if you have any questions, you can still send them in via the orange button. If you don't have, we will close off. So I will just take some minutes to wait. If you would like to link to me on LinkedIn, please do. You can also send me an email with your questions via the email address that you see right now, leanne.pantjes@capgemini.com. If you would like to know more about the backgrounds of the students or would like to link with one of the students because they're finishing their masters in the summer, so they also are very busy with job applications, of course, please also raise a question to me and I will get you into contact. Also, if you're more curious about the background of this research, I really look forward to meet face to face because that's also what I really like about my job. Are there any questions? Not yet, I think. So if you have any questions, send me an email and I will get back to you. And I thank you for your time. If you just have some spare minutes, please fill in the evaluation form so we know what to improve next, talking about making failures. Thank you for your time and hope to hear from you.